I welcome you to this regional knowledge exchange on implementing the Agenda 2030. You may ask why we should learn from each other. Does not the Agenda 2030 allow for different strokes for different folks? I would say yes, but even then, we can benefit from learning about each other's experiences. The Agenda 2030, I would always say, is built on two principles: sustainable development and leaving no one behind. And they seem to be the right things to do.
Governments need to work alongside the private sector to align their efforts behind the SDGs, whether through public-private partnerships or through encouraging initiatives driven from within the private sector itself to better report on its impact towards the SDGs.
So we've heard that many countries have aligned their strategies to the national priorities and SDGs. They have established institutional coordination mechanisms to facilitate policy coherence. They've also looked at selecting or prioritizing SDG accelerators and how to integrate SDGs into budgets and financing frameworks.
How do we assure the future of economic growth while ensuring that growth is equitable and decoupling economic growth from environmental destruction? That, in essence, is the challenge we've all agreed to collectively confront. And it's not straightforward. It's not straightforward because in that equation are inherent trade-offs.
That in order to transform the future of all people in our region, we will require capacity of governments to address structural dimensions of marginalization, exclusion, and inequality. And governments must equip themselves better to balance and to align the interests of different stakeholders.
Rural and urban poverty are inherently linked. As things change, we tend to focus on the things that are new and are changing, but we must keep our eyes on that enduring rural poverty, given that an estimated 39% of the rural population lives in multidimensional poverty and struggles with very fundamental development needs related to malnourishment and the like, and remain very vulnerable to some of these emerging risks such as climate change. And this creates an imperative for governments to balance competing policy objectives, such as how to balance food security, environmental sustainability, and poverty reduction.
The knowledge among the high school students was only less than 1%. However, with this video, the ratio goes up quite high. We haven't made a nationwide survey, but some schools turn out to be over 30% of students at least get to know the SDGs. So perhaps I think some sort of outreaching activities to the real beneficiaries and the real stakeholders of the SDGs is important.
Now, the way I look at it, and we at the Planning Commission look at this, is in terms of three I's: the identification of issues, the intervention of instruments, and the investment of resources. Now, on identification of issues, I think it's extremely important to tailor this big long list of SDGs and the targets to your country's circumstances, and to set and sequence the needs and priorities with whatever we have in the country's sort of own national planning trajectory. So as an example, there's an ongoing 14th periodic plan that the government of Nepal has in place. So it's extremely important that we align some of the intermediate targets with the end period of that plan.
Where I come from, we have fantastic data which is disaggregated on caste and the indigenous communities. But when we look at the indicators at the national level, they are nowhere to be seen. Just one word of socially excluded communities. This doesn't do any good to the socially excluded communities. And when we especially say leave no one behind, and you are excluding a vast number of socially excluded communities, then I don't think that we can even move the first step forward itself. We feel very, very hesitant to come in.
What we found in the work that UNDP has done, the country work that's been done in preparation for this event, is, not surprisingly, we've got some good practice cases and experiences emerging. So there are issues like establishing specific institutional arrangements, institutionalizing collaboration with civil society and the private sector, identifying specific programs that target priority SDGs, and so on. And we're also seeing where remaining gaps exist.
Now, a lot of our countries in the Pacific are going through the process of tailoring the SDGs to their national context. And I do believe that in my country, we have gone through all the important steps of ensuring that we do localize. Because I think by having a localization process, you are already setting on the ground the implementation plan for the SDGs.
What are the building blocks to ensure policy coherence? And what are the coordination mechanisms that different countries are using to really take an integrated approach? It's helpful to think about these things in terms of the horizontal coherence, that is, coherence across the different stakeholders and across the different sectors, as well as to look at the vertical coherence, that is, coherence between the international, national, and local levels, as well as the coherence over time, so across generations.
We are now into the second year of implementing the SDGs. And I think we're all starting to realize how complex it is to implement an agenda that is ambitious, integrated, and indivisible. There will be difficult choices to make, both political and strategic. There will be synergies and there will be trade-offs, and there will be conflicts. There'll be conflicts across the SDGs and the three dimensions of sustainable development. There may be conflicts across policy communities used to working in silos, conflicts between the short and long-term interests where politics sometimes gets in the way of good policies. And there may be conflicts between the domestic and the international objectives, particularly in the context of a highly interdependent world.
We have to involve all stakeholders, including government and parliament, philanthropy and businesses, civil society organizations, academic, and also the experts. And also institutional arrangement for SDGs have to be established.
At the vertical level, provincial governments have cluster approach. 4 clusters are established in which different people from different walks of life are represented. They are giving their feedback and they are giving cluster report how they want to do their work plan according to these clusters.
In 2013, GCAP held a General Assembly of its member national coalitions to seriously call for the adoption of a more radical set of goals than what we call the MDGs or the Minimalist Development Goals that will end poverty and inequalities. So the SDGs was a welcome event for all of us. The processes were very much welcome by GCAP together with other CSOs all over the world. So we lobbied our respective governments for the SDGs that will be radical, transformative, and universal, and will take care of people and planet.
An accelerator, which derives from this thinking, okay, is a priority action that when tackled has an impact across multiple development priorities. So when it comes to the SDGs, it's a point of intervention which has a multiple impact across goals and targets.
Our approach should be targeting the multiple, there's a linkage is talking about the multiple SDG goals as opposed to targeting a specific sector. So therefore, again, the trade-off is very important because in the SDG goal, the environment and natural resources are everywhere. In all the 17 goals, the environmental is embedded, and therefore the integrated approach is very, very important.
Look at how one target affects another target, but you also look how that target in turn interacts with other targets. So for example, if we have target A, if target A has a negative impact on target C, you don't only lose the positive progress that C could have on the wider SDG agenda, you also lose out on the positive influence that target C would have on target D and F. So that kind of increases the cost of the negative impact. And hopefully they will bring that knowledge with them into the design of policies and the implementation.
The link between localization and coherence is important. Because what is coherence? Coherence is basically the frame that allows the local government to basically implement the SDGs, right? So it's the frame that defines the boundary, but it's also the space within which a local government and a subnational government has the authority and the capacity to respond to the needs of the people. So it's both a framework as well as a space that we're advocating for localization to happen.
How we can actually operationalize localizing the SDGs, and we'll be presenting two tools that we have used to operationalize this task of localizing the SDGs. It's very important to assess the capacities of local governments, and the local governance diagnostic or the dashboard provides an assessment of the capacities of local governments to prioritize, plan, allocate, and deliver services to address multiple deprivations that people face at the local level.
There is a need to better integrate the implementation of the 2030 agenda in terms of local planning, monitoring, budgeting, and evaluation.
The real action and actual achievement of SDGs is going to be impacted by what truly happens at the local level. It's the action at the local level that's going to determine our success. The government of India at the national level has been taking a very strong leadership role in the visioning behind the 2030 agenda. From there, the national government has actually kind of given a coordination role to the National Institution for Transforming India, what was the former Planning Commission, and that is the body that is given the task of coordinating and tracking progress along the SDGs, and also supporting the provincial and subnational governments in the process. The Niti Aayog has since prepared a 15-year vision document, a national vision document for the country, a 7-year strategy, and a 3-year action plan.
The question is then, what are the coherence issues arising from these mandates, the way they're financed, and the budgeting of these particular services? Because I mean, I've heard quite a lot yesterday and today about planning, which of course is important, but the last step in whatever it is, the marathon, is the budget. I mean, nothing until things get translated into budget priorities or not, then public expenditures will not happen the way we want them to happen on the services we want.
What do these Sustainable Development Goals convey? The set of 17 goals and 169 targets is more than just a global framework. It's a global development language that we must embrace. To explain the depth of this, allow me to quote the former Secretary General. He said that At its essence, sustainability means ensuring prosperity and environmental protection without compromising the ability of future generation to meet its needs. He also rightly pointed out that we have no plan B because we don't have a planet B.
So what exactly is foresight? So in foresight, the work entails looking at different possibilities, scenarios, examining from what won't ever happen to what should happen.
One particular tool of foresight became quite widely used and is still widely used today in the Singapore government, and that is scenario planning. And so in scenario planning, what you aim to do is to encapsulate the future in 2 or 3 pictures of what the future will be like. And that way, the people who are using scenarios then become a lot more flexible and adaptive in their mindsets. They are not locked in to one view of the future, but have several views of the future against which to develop strategy, against which to test their thinking.
People here, I think, is close related to the SDG, which at the end of the day, the people of the nation, the people of the country have to benefit out of it. So for the start, what we did is that to have this kind of awareness of what are the people want in 30 years, 20 years time. That is very important for us. So this is just a glimpse of what they really want in the future for Malaysia in the next generation. Some of you know about the Vision 2020 of Malaysia. It's not far away from it. We have become a developed nation. That is our long-term planning since 1991 until 2020. We doing, of course, some of the objective and goals we cannot attain, but at least we have some track. We have a track. We have the direction on what we want to have in the future.
Some of the key lessons learned is that capacity is very important because there are many transaction costs to instituting a performance-informed budget in terms of data collection, data collation, verification and audit and analysis. Even if we've put in so many targets in the national budget, many agencies find it difficult to report in a timely manner these accomplishments. And then it takes an even higher degree of capacity to actually analyze where did the agency go wrong, why weren't the targets met.
In fact, that in terms of accommodating this SDG, we are a little bit behind, I understand. However, that in this introduction of budget call at this time in 2018, we have accommodated SDG targets in the budget call and asked spending agents to specify those targets and try to identify the specific resources required for each target.
I must also say that Vanuatu launched the National Sustainable Development Plans we call People's Plans. Vanuatu, I think we started getting rid of SDG, and now we use the synonym of NSTP, which is our main Sustainable Development Plan. As you can see, we captured we have 3 pillars: environment, society, and economy. And we trimmed down the indicators to 196, and we have 205 indicators. And that's how we localize SDC at the national levels. And we always say that if we've done well in the planning side, then the budget shouldn't be a problem. But budget is like the other side of the coin. Planning and budget, we are talking about the 2 sides of the same coin. I must say that a lot of us have been growing gray hair in the planning and policy. We're working with MDG, and now is the SDG, and we know what is exactly the values is and the problem is in our countries, and by changing and reforming the way we do things, it provides a new platforms where it's innovate and also give us an incentives to move forward with a new development sustainable goals.
Good afternoon, everybody. So welcome to our Civil Society Parallel Session. Actually, we want to call it the episode 2 of Development Justice Talks.
When it comes to the SDGs, we are all developing countries. We're all struggling with sustainable development, and this is no longer about development cooperation anymore.
When we say transformative, it should transform the current inequality that we have now. The slogan, "No one left behind" or "Leaving no one behind," and all sorts of mutations of that slogan really explicitly says that we need to address inequality.
Our breakout session, that the theme, and for me, was one of needing to evolve at multiple levels in order to keep going and continue to ask ourselves tough questions about whether what we're doing is good enough and how we can make it better.
Thank you very much for this very rich discussion.